Alright, so today we're going to be taking a look at Silent Hill 3. This is the third video I've done, obviously. Technically fourth video I've done on the Silent Hill series, and I've covered the first two games already. I'll leave a link to those in the description. But Silent Hill 3 is probably the one I've had the least kind of exposure to. I have played it a long time ago. And I remember being good. I remember being a lot more combat focused than the first two. Still had the kind of puzzle sections, combat sections, but the combat sections were a bit bigger, if I remember. That was a bit more involved, and it's sometimes quite difficult. But Silent Hill 3, I do remember a lot of the kind of story, and some of the gameplay elements are very similar to the first two, but there's a couple of interesting things I know about Silent Hill 3 in terms of its development and stuff like that. So Silent Hill 3, first and foremost, is a direct sequel to the first game. You play as Heather Mason, who is the child that is left for Harry at the end of the first game. Obviously it's not actually his daughter, but he did kind of take her and look after her and help raise her. So this is a direct sequel to the first game. Originally, Silent Hill 3 was going to be an on-rail shooter game, you know, like the couple of Resident Evil games like that. I think Survivor or the Umbrella Chronicles is like a rail shooter game, but eventually that was changed to be a proper game. And it was basically made alongside Silent Hill 4, and they're a year apart from release. So this came out in 2003, I think, and then 4 came out in 2004. As with the other Silent Hill games, there is multiple endings to the game. I don't think there's as many in this one than the first two, but I believe there is a good ending in this game, a bad ending in this game, and a joke ending, which I actually remember, and if anyone's actually seen it, you'll know what I mean. It's quite crazy. It's quite funny as well. But essentially the story of Silent Hill 3 is Heather wakes up in a mall, which is all but abandoned, and there is a detective there. I believe his name's called Douglas or something like that. And he's basically looking for her, and he wants to know. He has information about her birth. Obviously she doesn't know, but she just ignores him basically, and you know she's in this mall and no one else is there, and it's essentially just filled with monsters from the Silent Hill universe. There's a lot of new monsters in this game that are honestly quite good. They look quite good, but eventually you go through the mall sequence of the game, and then you go to Silent Hill for reasons I'll not say like straight reasons why, because there's spoilers there, so if anyone hasn't played the game, I'm not going to spoil a massive point of the 3 storyline. But you go to Silent Hill, and it's essentially her kind of finding out what happened to her when she was a kid in the first game. So yeah, they do link up quite well. It is a direct sequel to the first game. So 2 is its own thing, with James and stuff like that. That is its own thing, and then 3 does carry on years later from the events of the original. A couple of gameplay things to point out about this game is obviously it's still kind of very similar to the first two in a lot of ways. You know, it's a third-person game. There's again the limited inventory spaces, healing and weapons are kind of, you know, scattered around, melee weapons and stuff like that. Healing as well. Key items and puzzles and keys as well for doors. It does kind of keep that theme going of every door in Silent Hill seems to be locked and you can't open them. They're just there to try and open. So you'll be sitting there for hours opening every door until you find out which one you can go through or which one is like an optional room. That's a bit of a nightmare. But one thing that's interesting about this game is they add different options of difficulty for puzzle sections and different options of difficulty for combat sections, like separately. Obviously the combat sections is pretty self-explanatory, you know, things are harder to kill and you take more damage, but the puzzle sections, it would essentially require you to remember more or kind of do an extra step in it. But then obviously that was optional as well. I believe one of the puzzles in the game required you to actually have some kind of knowledge about Shakespeare plays. I'm not sure which one specifically, but it required you to actually have, you know, that information for you physically as the player to know that stuff, to help you solve it, because it didn't tell you in game, it just kind of referenced or nodded to it and you just kind of go, okay, I know what this means. So if you were kind of smart, you could do these harder difficulty puzzles, but for the most part, I do believe just go for it on normal. Normal puzzles and hard combat's probably the more enjoyable part of playing the game for me. But no, yeah, obviously a lot of the combat and gameplay mechanics from this game are just returning from the second game, more specifically the second game. It plays a lot like 2, but what's interesting about this one is it's more focused on the other world. Now, to briefly go over what that is, Silent Hill has like 3 dimensions basically. The town's split up in 3 dimensions. There's the normal one, which everyone sees. There's the kind of the fog world, which is where the town's like shrouded and there's things walking around in the streets and stuff like that. And then there's the other world, which is essentially hell dimension, basically. Everything's covered in blood and it's monsters everywhere and it's a bit creepy. But this one primarily takes place in the other world parts of the dimensions. And then I'm pretty sure, because two splits between them. One is more about the fog dimension, and then 4, I'm not entirely sure. I believe it's quite separated out in 4, but at the same time, there's a lot of different areas in 4 that are kind of obscure. The water prison is a big example of that. Like, that's a whole different thing. But in terms of new things that Silent Hill 3 added to the series, in terms of gameplay standpoint, obviously the combat is very kind of similar to the predecessor of Silent Hill 2, but there is some new things in this game, mechanics wise, that are useful. For example, yes, you can try all these 50 million doors, but the map system in 3 does kind of show you like which doors are locked and which doors aren't, so you don't have to kind of remember or guess which ones you need to open still. On top of that, there is a blocking system, kind of like, for example, RE7 and Village, where you can kind of block and it does reduced or no damage from certain attacks. There's also beef jerky, which is an item that you can use to distract monsters. They will obviously go, it's like a bait item that will go for it instead of you. As well as a radio. The radio thing is interesting because it kind of crackles, like it looks like static when there's things near you that you can't necessarily see. So it's a good warning sign that something's close to you, so just get ready. These are things that haven't been done in the previous 2, so it does add some kind of, you can kind of think and prepare a bit better for what's coming, because you'll know what's coming. You can kind of distract things and fight other things while any other enemies are distracted. It does help a lot. There's also a flashlight you get pretty early on, but obviously a flashlight is just for seeing in the dark, so nothing special there. But overall, I would say Silent Hill 3 is a pretty solid game. As most people do know, the series did kind of decline over time. I quite like 4. I honestly do quite like Silent Hill 4. I think it's quite unique in a sense, it's especially quite different to the other 3 in terms of some things that happen, some things you can do. But then after 4, the series did kind of take a dip with Downpour and Homecoming and stuff like that. I might cover those in the future, but I do kind of just want to go over the main 4 first, and then if people want to see, videos of the other games, Origins, again, Downpour, Homecoming, stuff like that, I can do so do let me know. But yeah, Silent Hill 3 overall, good game. I like how it links to the first game. It's always good when a sequel kind of does follow back rather than it being individual stories in the universe. I do think doing it either way is pretty good. But one thing that I really like about Resident Evil compared to Silent Hill is, and it is getting a bit extreme now, I would say in Resident Evil a little bit, is from 1 to Village, it's the same story. Like, it's all canon. Like, it all is a continuous story. Obviously, there's Silent Hill 1, Silent Hill 2 are separate, different characters, but 1 and 3 are linked, and then 4 is again fairly separate as well, which is not a bad thing. You have more creativity then, you can kind of make a new story involved in the universe rather than keeping a continuous flow, because Resident Evil is kind of, it's not even 8 games long, the story. It's like the main 8 and then the bridge games of Revelations, the spin-offs like 0, so there's a lot going on, and I've mentioned a million times that Resident Evil is probably coming to a point now where those OG characters are going to be kind of phased out over time, unless they decide to, obviously, for example, make 9 the last one in a concurrent storyline, and then do kind of individual games in the series based in certain times in the timeline. But, we'll see what happens with that. But either way, Silent Hill 3, solid game. If you haven't played it already, by all means, go and do so. It's on the Silent Hill collection. I believe that's 2 and 3 HD, and they're available on PS3, 4, Xbox One, and Series consoles, as well as PC. I don't know if it's actually on PS4, it could be, but I'm not 100% sure. But either way, they're accessible. And yeah, that'll do it. Leave your thoughts on Silent Hill 3 in the comments. I'm already seeing some people talk about Silent Hill 3 in some of my previous videos, so it'll be interesting to see what everyone else thinks of this game. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.